The Galactic Concord, an empire spanning countless star systems, was a vast network of peace and order. Yet, under the surface, a war raged on, one that threatened to unravel it all. The Concord had enemies, most notably the Shriek Dominion, a race of highly intelligent, ruthless invaders determined to subjugate every species they encountered. Their strategy was simple: destroy all power sources, cripple technology, and leave civilizations vulnerable to their devastating forces. Among the Concord's ranks was an unlikely hero, Rilo Ares, an engineer with no military experience and no desire for combat. A quiet figure in the bustling heart of the Concord's technological hub, Rilo had never been one for adventure. His life revolved around the intricate mechanics of star ships, the careful design of hyperdrive engines, and the development of defensive systems. But the universe had a way of changing a person's destiny. Rilo's story began on the distant industrial world of Valsis, a planet known for its innovation and technical prowess. Valsis had been spared from the Shriek's initial invasions due to its strategic location on the edge of Concord-controlled space. Yet that peace would soon come to an end. In the heart of Valsis, the Empire's Central Engineering Directorate had been working on a project that could tip the balance in the war, the Titan Core, a prototype weapon designed to give the Concord the upper hand against the Shriek. The Titan Core was not just a weapon, it was a piece of technology so advanced that its mere existence could change the course of the conflict. Rilo's skill with mechanical systems had earned him a place on the project, but when the attack came, it was far worse than anyone anticipated. The Shriek Dominion launched a coordinated strike, not only against the Titan Core's production facility but against every major military and technological site across the galaxy. Their goal was clear: eradicate anything that could stand in their way. For days, the galaxy reeled under the Dominion's attacks. Cities burned, fleets were decimated, and a sense of helplessness spread like wildfire. Rilo, however, was focused on something else. Amidst the chaos, the Titan Core's prototype was damaged beyond repair during a Dominion raid. It was clear that without the weapon, the Concord had no hope of winning the war. If the Dominion could seize control of it, the balance of power would shift irreversibly in their favor. Yet, as everyone scrambled to regroup, Rilo saw a different solution, one that no one else had the courage to attempt. He would repair the Titan Core, but in a way no one had ever thought possible. It wasn't just about putting together broken pieces. No, Rilo had an idea that could make the core more powerful than anyone had imagined, a new, untested method of harnessing energy, a leap in technology that could change the fate of the galaxy. The risk was monumental. No one had ever attempted anything like it. If he failed, the consequences would be devastating, not only for him but for the entire galaxy. Yet, deep down, Rilo felt an undeniable pull. Something inside him knew that the universe was at a crossroads, and only a small handful of minds could alter its trajectory. As the last of the great engineering minds of Valsis, Rilo took it upon himself to make the impossible possible. He had always believed that true heroes weren't the ones wielding weapons or commanding armies. True heroes were the ones who quietly worked behind the scenes, who used their intellect to solve problems that seemed insurmountable. Rilo Ares was not a soldier. He wasn't a commander. But in the wake of the Shriek's devastating assault, he was about to become the galaxy's most unlikely savior. In the stillness of his workshop, surrounded by wires, circuits, and broken remnants of what was supposed to be the future, Rilo made his decision. He would work tirelessly until the Titan Core was ready. There was no more time for hesitation. The war was on the brink of annihilation, and only he could turn the tide. Unbeknownst to Rilo, the Shriek were already aware of his intentions. Their agents had infiltrated the highest ranks of the Galactic Concord, and the repair of the Titan Core had not gone unnoticed. The fate of the galaxy rested on the shoulders of one man, and both sides would soon come to realize that the war was no longer just about power or politics, it was about survival. And Rilo Ares was about to become the fulcrum upon which the future of the galaxy would pivot. Rilo's hands shook as he worked, carefully soldering a vital circuit that would help rechannel energy from the core's primary conduit. The workshop was dimly lit, the only light coming from the flickering holoscreens and the soft hum of machines. He barely noticed the time passing, days, perhaps even weeks, since he'd made the decision to repair the Titan core. Outside the confines of his workshop, the galaxy was in turmoil. The Shriek Dominion, ruthless and strategic, had struck with unrelenting force. Systems fell like dominoes, one after another, as the Concord struggled to mount a counterattack. The Shriek's superiority in technological warfare, coupled with their insidious infiltration methods, made them nearly impossible to defeat. And yet, within the heart of the Concord's technological capital, Rilo felt the weight of responsibility bearing down on him. The Titan core, his only hope for turning the tide of war, was a jigsaw puzzle of ancient, cutting-edge technology, many of which had never been fully understood. The energy source he intended to harness was a volatile concept known only to a select few in the Concord's elite engineering divisions. But even they had been unwilling to test the core's true potential. Rilo, however, was determined to push forward. But unbeknownst to him, the clock was ticking faster than he realized. Back at Concord Command, high-ranking officials were growing increasingly desperate. The Shriek had not only attacked the military but had also begun sowing discord among the highest echelons of the Galactic Concord itself. The Shriek were known for their ability to infiltrate and manipulate, and it appeared that their reach extended deeper than anyone had expected. One evening, a strange transmission arrived at the Central Command Station, a garbled message that seemed like a random jumble of numbers and words. It was so heavily encrypted that only a few experts could even begin to decode it. At first, they thought it was the remnants of a failed communication from one of the devastated systems. But when the message was decrypted, it revealed something far more sinister, an encoded blueprint for the Titan core. The transmission was not a simple blueprint, it was a series of schematics that outlined the core's inner workings in precise detail, along with several flaws and weaknesses that Rilo had yet to discover. The message was from an inside source, someone within the Concord's ranks. This information could only have come from a trusted insider. Someone who knew exactly what Rilo was attempting. The Shriek had managed to penetrate deeper than ever before, and now they were playing a dangerous game of chess, using Rilo and the Titan core as their pawns. Rilo, oblivious to this treachery, continued his work, unaware that his every move was being watched. His focus remained on the task at hand, fixing the core's power matrix, recalibrating the conduits, and adjusting the energy regulators. But as the pieces of the puzzle slowly began to come together, strange anomalies started to appear in his work. Unexplainable glitches in the energy flow, sudden power surges, and the occasional shutdown of crucial systems. Rilo dismissed these as side effects of working with such volatile, untested technology. But the reality was more insidious. Someone, or something, was tampering with his efforts. It wasn't until late one night, when Rilo was alone in his workshop, that he began to suspect something was wrong. A series of strange codes had begun appearing on his screens, codes that didn't belong. Someone had breached his system. As his heart raced, he quickly ran a security scan, but the system was silent. No alarms, no notifications. Just the creeping feeling that he wasn't alone. He froze, staring at the screens in disbelief. There, hidden within the code, was a pattern, one he recognized. It was the same blueprint he had seen in the decoded transmission. Rilo's breath caught in his throat. The Shriek had been here, but who among the Concord was aiding them? He couldn't believe it. A traitor, someone from within had been sabotaging his work. The enemy had been hiding in plain sight all along. As the realization settled in, Rilo knew the stakes were even higher than he had imagined. Not only did he have to finish the Titan core and make it operational, but now, he had to root out the mole who was trying to sabotage his every move. He was no longer just fighting the Shriek. He was now fighting a war from within, and trust would be his greatest challenge. But Rilo had no intention of giving up. He had come this far, and the galaxy's fate rested on his shoulders. He had no time to waste. The traitor could wait, his priority was to finish the core and use it before it was too late. The clock was ticking, and the war would not wait for him to uncover every secret. The only thing that mattered now was survival. With steely determination, Rilo set to work, knowing that the real battle had only just begun. Rilo's suspicions about the traitor inside the Concorde had begun to consume him. Every time he stepped into his workshop, he felt eyes on him, watching his every move. The encrypted blueprint had been a subtle clue, but it was more than just a message, it was a signal that someone was working against him. Someone within the ranks of the very people he was trying to save. The situation was growing more perilous by the day. As the war with the Shriek raged on, their forces seemed to know everything before the Concorde could react. Fleets were ambushed in hyperspace. Defensive measures were breached effortlessly. But even worse, vital communications and strategies were being leaked, deliberately sabotaged. Rilo knew that the failure of the Titan core was inevitable if this sabotage continued. The core was only a part of the larger plan. It needed to be activated at the right time, with the right sequence of operations, but someone inside the Concorde had knowledge of the project, perhaps even inside access to the core itself. Late one night, Rilo sat hunched over his workbench, staring at the holographic display of the core's energy matrix. His fingers hovered over the keys, but his mind was elsewhere, piecing together the fragments of evidence he had gathered. The mysterious codes, the unexpected glitches, and the strange anomalies in the core's power systems, they all pointed to one thing: a sleeper agent embedded within the highest levels of the Galactic Concorde. Rilo had always prided himself on his technical expertise, but this wasn't something that could be solved with tools and algorithms. It was a matter of human nature. The sabotage wasn't random, it was calculated, precise, and personal. Someone knew how Rilo worked, how he thought, and how to derail his every step. He had to act quickly. His next move was to confront the person he trusted most, Captain Alara Voss, the military liaison assigned to oversee the Titan core project. Alara had been his constant companion throughout the rebuilding process. She had always been there, coordinating military logistics, making sure resources were available when Rilo needed them. If anyone could help him root out the mole, it was her. Alara arrived at his workshop at dawn, her boots clicking on the metal floor as she stepped inside. Her sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in the humming machinery, the scattered tools, and the piles of schematics strewn about. She was everything Rilo wasn't: practical, decisive, and unflinchingly loyal to the Concorde. She had been his closest ally since the beginning of the project, and he had trusted her without question. But now, trust felt like a fragile thing. "Alara," Rilo said quietly, glancing up from his work. His voice betrayed none of the turmoil that churned inside him. "We have a problem." She raised an eyebrow. "I know. The Shriek are pressing their advantage across several fronts, and we're losing ground." "No," Rilo said, his eyes narrowing. "There's something else. The sabotage, it's coming from within the Concorde." Alara's expression hardened, but her gaze never wavered. "You're sure?" Rilo nodded, his voice low. "The encrypted transmission. The glitches in the core's systems. The Shriek have infiltrated us. Someone inside is leaking information, feeding them details of our every move." Alara took a step closer, her face now inches from his. "And you think it's one of us?" Rilo hesitated. "I don't know. But it has to be. The knowledge they have, it's too specific. They know how the core works, how to sabotage it without anyone noticing. And the timeline. It's all too precise." Alara ran a hand through her short-cropped hair, a rare sign of uncertainty. "If you're right, then we've got a traitor in our midst. Someone who's worked hard to get this close to the heart of the war." Rilo swallowed hard. He couldn't bring himself to say it, but the suspicion gnawed at him. It could be anyone. Even Alara. She caught the brief flicker of doubt in his eyes and immediately stiffened. "You don't think it's me, do you?" Rilo recoiled, startled. "No. I trust you." The moment hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of unspoken words. But before Rilo could respond, a faint beep echoed from one of the terminals. It was a warning, an alert. Alara's face hardened. "What's that?" Rilo's fingers flew over the keyboard, and his eyes widened as a red alert flashed across the screen. The Titan core's power systems had been tampered with again. But this time, the changes were far more severe. The sabotage wasn't just about disabling the core, it was an attempt to destroy it entirely. No, Rilo whispered, realization dawning. They're going to try to destroy it before we can finish it. Elara clenched her fists. We need to find out who's behind this, now. Rilo looked at her, his mind racing. We have to act fast. I'm going to reroute the power grid manually, but I need you to find the leak. We can't let them sabotage this again. As Elara turned and moved toward the door, Rilo's mind raced. The sabotage was no accident. Someone in their ranks had not only gained access to the core but was actively working to destroy it. There was no room for error anymore. The war was teetering on the brink, and if Rilo couldn't fix the core in time, it would be too late for the galaxy to survive. The stakes had never been higher. Time was running out, and the true enemy wasn't just the Shriek, it was someone much closer to home. The warning signals from the core's power grid echoed like a death knell in Rilo's ears. He quickly rerouted the energy to the backup systems, but he knew it wouldn't last long. The sabotage had escalated, this wasn't just a minor glitch anymore. Whoever was responsible had an intimate knowledge of the core's inner workings and had managed to manipulate it without triggering any immediate alarms. The situation had become far more dangerous than Rilo had anticipated. Elara, ever the soldier, wasted no time. She had already sent out a call to the highest levels of the Galactic Concord Security Division, requesting a full lockdown of the Titan core facility. They couldn't afford any more delays. The traitor, whoever they were, had to be found before they could do any more damage. As Rilo worked to stabilize the core, his mind couldn't help but return to the unsettling thought, who could it be? The sabotage had to be orchestrated by someone with access to the deepest levels of military intelligence. But who among them could betray the Concord like this? The people he trusted most were the ones he now feared the most. With every passing second, the pressure mounted. Rilo's fingers danced across the control panels, manually recalibrating the systems. But the sabotage had left deep scars, circuitry burned beyond repair, energy conduits shorted out, and critical systems that were supposed to provide a fail-safe had been bypassed. He knew it would only be a matter of time before the core failed completely, rendering everything they had worked for a distant memory. Elara's voice crackled over the comm, Rilo, we need to talk. I've been looking into this further, and we've got a problem. Someone on the inside is using military encryption codes to access our systems. Whoever it is, they're highly skilled. Rilo's heart skipped a beat. Military encryption, that was the domain of the highest echelons of command. Only a few people had access to those kinds of codes, people who could get past the most secure firewalls the Concord had. That meant the mole was far more deeply embedded than they'd initially thought. I'm almost done here, Rilo said, trying to keep his voice steady. But you're right. We need to find out who's responsible, and fast. Elara's footsteps echoed on the other end of the comm, her voice tight with urgency. I've already started the investigation. I'm pulling every record from the past few weeks, personnel shifts, data logs, access points. Someone is covering their tracks, but they can't hide forever. The line cut off, and Rilo could hear her footsteps fade as she moved to carry out her task. His fingers slowed, his mind consumed by the problem at hand. The sabotage had been methodical, well-planned. But as he worked, Rilo realized something important: the sabotage wasn't just to disable the core. It was an attempt to discredit him, to sabotage his credibility and prevent him from finishing the job. The traitor knew that if the core were completed, the war would be won. And that could not be allowed. But who would want to stop me? Rilo wondered. The more he thought about it, the more it became clear. The Shriek were too far away to orchestrate such a precise and inside job. This wasn't their style. This was personal. It had to be someone within the Concord itself. Just as Rilo was about to make another adjustment, a sudden chill ran down his spine. He had a gut feeling he couldn't shake, a feeling that someone was watching him. Without thinking, he quickly accessed the security footage from the workshop. His breath caught when he saw it, just a fleeting shadow at the edge of the screen. It was barely visible, but it was there. Someone had been in the workshop. Rilo's mind raced as he replayed the footage. The figure was cloaked, their face obscured, but they had been inside his workspace, clearly tampering with the equipment while he was working late into the night. The figure moved with the precision of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Rilo's pulse quickened. There was no time to waste. He needed to confront this person, but he couldn't do it alone. He needed Elara. He activated his comm and contacted her immediately. "Elara, we've got a breach. Someone's been inside the workshop." She responded swiftly. "Where's the footage?" "I'll be there in 5. The thought of confronting an infiltrator, someone who had betrayed not only Rilo's trust but the entire galaxy, made his skin crawl. But he had no choice. He had to keep going. There was no turning back. As Rilo prepared to leave the workshop, a noise echoed from the hallway, footsteps approaching fast. He tensed, his fingers curling into fists, ready for a confrontation. The door to the workshop opened with a hiss, and Elara stepped inside, her expression unreadable. She didn't wait for Rilo to speak. "We need to move. I've found something." Without another word, she led him down the dimly lit corridors of the facility, her pace quick and purposeful. Rilo's mind was still racing. Had she uncovered the identity of the mole? Could they finally get the answers they needed? They arrived at a secure data terminal, locked and sealed behind layers of encryption. Elara turned to Rilo, her eyes narrowed. "I accessed the personnel records. There's only one person who could have gotten their hands on those military encryption codes, and it's someone you trust." Rilo's stomach sank as he stared at her, the implications of her words settling like a weight on his chest. "Who?" he asked, barely able to get the words out. Elara hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "It's Admiral Garroth." Rilo's heart skipped a beat. The Admiral? The same man who had signed off on the project, overseen their funding, and praised Rilo for his work? The same man who had always seemed like a solid ally? But as the truth sank in, Rilo realized that this betrayal was deeper than he could have imagined. If Garroth was the traitor, then the stakes had just gotten much higher. They were up against someone with command over the fleet, resources, and a vast network of loyal followers. And Garroth was about to make his move. The revelation that Admiral Garroth was the mole hit Rilo like a hammer to the chest. The man who had always been a symbol of stability within the Concord, the very person who had given Rilo the resources and trust to build the Titan core, was now revealed as the architect of their destruction. It didn't make sense. Garroth was a hero to many, a respected military leader, a figure of strength. How could he be the one to betray them all? Rilo stood motionless for a long moment, staring at the data terminal, the name of Garroth flashing in front of his eyes. Elara stood beside him, her face grim and determined. She hadn't been surprised, she had known. She had suspected all along. And now the truth had come to light. "How do you know?" Rilo whispered, almost as if he didn't want to hear the answer. The shock was overwhelming, and a sense of betrayal gnawed at him. He had worked with Garroth for so long, confided in him, trusted him. To think that this man had been working against them from the very beginning. Elara's eyes were cold, steely. His encrypted access codes were the only ones that matched the sabotage on the core. He's been feeding the Shriek intel for months, possibly longer. It's not just sabotage. It's treason. Rilo's stomach churned, but his mind was already working, piecing together the pieces of the puzzle. The slow disintegration of the Concord's defenses, the leaks in critical communications, it all made sense now. Garroth had been playing a long game, positioning himself at the heart of the war effort, while subtly ensuring that the Shriek had every advantage they needed. The sabotage of the Titan core wasn't a mistake. It had been deliberate. He wanted to see the weapon fail, to keep the Concord weak and vulnerable. The stakes weren't just about power. Garroth had a bigger goal, one that had remained hidden beneath the surface. "We need to move now," Elara urged, snapping Rilo out of his reverie. "If Garroth knows we're onto him, he'll act fast. The Shriek will be prepared to make their final push, and if we don't stop him, the Titan core will never be activated." Rilo's mind raced, 1,000 scenarios playing out in his head. He thought of the damage already done to the core, the systems that were barely holding together, the countless hours spent rebuilding and fixing what had been broken. They were running out of time, and now the real battle wasn't just against the Shriek, it was against a traitor within their ranks who had more than enough power to destroy everything they had worked for. "We have to confront him," Rilo said, his voice low but resolute. He turned toward Elara, his decision clear. "We can't let him destroy everything. He's in command of the fleet. He could order the entire military to stop us." "I know," Elara replied. "But we have one advantage, Garroth doesn't know we've figured him out. We can use that to our advantage. But we need to move quickly, before he has the chance to enact his plans." The urgency in her voice was palpable. Elara had seen firsthand what Garroth was capable of. He was a master manipulator, capable of bending entire fleets to his will. If he was allowed to execute his final moves, it could mean the end for the galaxy. Rilo nodded, his mind racing with plans. "We can't just march into the command center and confront him. He'll have every defense at his disposal. We need to be smart about this. If we're going to take him down, we need leverage." Elara's eyes gleamed with determination. "We already have leverage. He doesn't know that we've already started monitoring his communications. I've intercepted a few of his encrypted messages. He's been in contact with the Shriek, coordinating their next attack." Rilo's heart skipped a beat. "You have proof?" "I do," Elara said, pulling a small data pad from her belt and handing it to Rilo. He scanned through the contents quickly. There, in black and white, were the encrypted messages that linked Garroth to the Shriek, the undeniable proof that he was orchestrating the downfall of the Concord from within. "We can't let this get out," Rilo said, looking up at Elara. "If Garroth finds out we've intercepted this, he'll have us both killed." "We'll be careful," she replied, her voice steady. "But we can't wait any longer. The Shriek are already preparing their assault. If Garroth gets the signal to launch, it'll be too late. We have to move before he can activate his plan." Rilo's mind raced as he formulated a plan. They had to confront Garroth before he could rally the fleet, before he could pull off his final betrayal. The stakes were higher than ever, and they had to move swiftly. There was no time for second chances. As Rilo and Elara made their way through the winding corridors of the base, they could feel the weight of the mission pressing on them. They knew that this wasn't just about saving the core, it was about saving the entire galaxy from an unimaginable fate. Garetha's influence stretched deep within the Concord's ranks, and if they were going to have any hope of stopping him, they needed to strike fast and hard. The final confrontation with Garroth was inevitable. But Rilo couldn't help but wonder just how far Garroth had gone to ensure his victory. Had the Admiral been planning this for years? Had he orchestrated every piece of the galaxy's downfall, every loss, every betrayal, just to see the Concord crumble? As they neared Garetha's command center, Rilo knew one thing for sure: this was the moment that would define the future of the galaxy. The battle wasn't just about the Titan core, it was about choosing who would rule the galaxy, those who fought for peace and unity, or those who sought only power at any cost. And Rilo was about to make a decision that would change everything. The command center was as secure as a fortress, its walls reinforced with the highest level of military-grade protection. Every inch of the facility was designed to resist even the most advanced forms of infiltration. And yet, Rilo and Elara moved through it with precision, shadows in the night, undetected by the very systems designed to stop them. The final confrontation was imminent, and the weight of the decision they were about to make hung heavy in the air. As they approached the command center, Elara motioned for Rilo to pause. Her sharp eyes scanned the hallway ahead, and she pressed herself against the wall, listening. The sounds of muffled voices echoed faintly through the corridor, their cadence low but intense. Rilo tensed. They were close now, close to Garroth, close to the final moments before everything changed. "He's in there," Elara whispered, her breath steady, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "We don't have much time before the fleet mobilizes. If we don't stop him now, the Shriek will have a clear path to the core, and the galaxy will fall into chaos." Rilo nodded, his mind focused. The evidence they had gathered, the intercepted communications, the sabotage of the core, was damning. But it wasn't enough. The Admiral had too much power, too many loyal supporters. Confronting him directly would be dangerous. They needed a plan, something that would neutralize Garetha's ability to retaliate. "I've been thinking," Rilo said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to cut off his access to the fleet's command systems. If we can disable his communication channels, he'll be cut off from his forces. Without orders, his people will be confused, disorganized." Elara's eyes narrowed, contemplating the idea. "And how do we disable them?" "There's a secondary command terminal in the lower levels. It's not as heavily secured as the main one. If we can reach it and input a virus, we can lock down Garetha's access. It'll delay his ability to launch any kind of attack." Elara nodded. "Let's move." They moved swiftly, their footsteps muted on the metal floor as they slipped past security checkpoints, relying on Elara's intimate knowledge of the base's layout. Rilo felt a sense of urgency growing in his chest. Garroth was close, but time was slipping through their fingers. If they didn't act now, the entire fleet would be at Garetha's command, and then they'd be playing his game. They reached the lower levels without incident, their path clear for the moment. Rilo's mind was sharp, his fingers moving quickly over the terminal as he accessed the secondary systems. The digital interface was complex, but he had built his reputation on his ability to break through the toughest barriers. The screen flickered as the virus began to deploy, a wave of panic rising within him. Would it work? Was Garroth already aware of their presence? "Elara, we're running out of time," Rilo muttered, glancing nervously at the countdown on the terminal. If the virus didn't take hold in the next few minutes, they would be exposed. "Almost there," Elara replied, her voice tight with determination. Her hand hovered near her sidearm, every muscle coiled and ready for a confrontation. "Once the virus takes hold, we'll have a few minutes to get Garroth alone. I'll handle him. You focus on the systems." Rilo nodded, his hand still dancing over the console, as the virus finally began to infiltrate the system. The countdown had stopped. The digital clock blinked red, indicating that the breach had been successful. They had bought themselves precious moments. But just as they were about to move, a sound, a sharp, mechanical click, echoed through the air, freezing them in place. Garetha's voice rang out from the darkness. "You've been busy, haven't you?" Rilo's heart skipped. They had been caught. From the shadows, Garroth stepped forward, his cold eyes locking onto them. The Admiral's presence filled the room, his tall frame a silhouette of power. His uniform, impeccably tailored, and the gleaming insignia of the Concord on his chest were the same as they had always been. But now, under the dim lights, he was something else entirely, a predator, a traitor, the embodiment of everything that Rilo and Elara had fought to stop. "You're too late," Garroth said, his voice low and measured, betraying no emotion. "I've already issued the orders to mobilize the fleet. The Shriek will be here within the hour. And there's nothing you can do to stop them now." Rilo's pulse quickened. The Admiral had known. He had been ahead of them every step of the way. "How long?" Rilo asked, his voice hard. "How long have you been playing us?" Garetha's lips curled into a smile, but it was devoid of warmth. "Since the beginning. Since the day I recommended the Titan Core project. The Shriek didn't need to destroy your precious weapon, they just needed to stop you from completing it. And I've done my part." Elara stepped forward, her hand resting on her sidearm, her eyes burning with fury. "You're a traitor to the Concord, Garroth. To the entire galaxy. You won't get away with this. Gareth's smile widened, his eyes gleaming with cold satisfaction. It's too late, Elara. You've underestimated me. I've already won. Rylo's mind raced as the realization settled in. They were standing in front of a man who had orchestrated the destruction of everything they had fought for. But they still had one thing Garroth didn't anticipate: the virus was already active. They had the upper hand, if only for a moment. We'll see about that, Rylo said through gritted teeth, his fingers already moving across his own terminal, preparing the next phase of the plan. Garroth may have thought he had already won, but Rylo wasn't going to let the Admiral have the last word. The air around them grew thick with tension. Every decision, every action, now held the weight of the galaxy's future. This was no longer just a battle of technology or military power, it was a fight for the soul of the Concord. Rylo and Elara had one last chance to make sure Gareth's treachery didn't destroy everything. The countdown had started. It was time to stop Garroth. And this time, Rylo was ready. The tension in the room was palpable, thick as the air in an ancient tomb. Rylo's hands were steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through his mind. Garroth, once the epitome of honor and leadership, was now a traitor with everything to lose. But Rylo couldn't afford to get caught up in the emotions of it. He had to focus. There was a war to win, and the galaxy's fate rested on a knife's edge. You think a virus will stop me? Garroth said, his voice dripping with disdain. I've anticipated every move. The fleet is already en route, and once I've neutralized the Titan core, nothing will stand in my way. Rylo's fingers hovered over the terminal. It was now or never. The virus had infiltrated Gareth's systems, but it was only the first step. The true weapon was still hidden in the secondary command protocols, deep within the system's backdoor. If he could activate the fail-safe, Gareth's access would be severed completely, preventing the fleet from moving forward. If not, well, then they were all doomed. Elara, still standing at the ready, gave a sharp glance toward Rylo. She could sense the hesitation, the quiet fear behind his calm exterior. She'd known him long enough to see when he was uncertain. I can handle him, she said quietly. Just give me a chance to take him down. Rylo shook his head slightly, his thoughts racing. He knew Elara could take care of herself. She was a fierce fighter, unmatched in skill. But this wasn't just about fighting. It was about outsmarting Garroth, disrupting his plans before they reached the point of no return. Rylo needed to stall him just a little longer. Not yet, he muttered, fingers flying over the console again. Just a little longer. Garroth seemed to sense the tension in the room. He took a slow step forward, his face unreadable. You still don't get it, do you? His voice was quiet, almost regretful. The truth is, I never saw the core as a weapon for peace. It was always a weapon for control. The Shriek understand that. They understand that power is everything. That's why they'll win, and you will lose. His words hung in the air, cutting through the silence like a blade. Garroth wasn't just a traitor. He had become a fanatic, a zealot for his cause, convinced that the galaxy could only survive if it bent to his vision of order and domination. The Shriek weren't enemies to him, they were allies in a new era. And Rylo, for all his ingenuity, was nothing more than an obstacle. Rylo swallowed hard, forcing the words out. You've already lost, Garroth. You just don't know it yet. The Admiral's eyes narrowed, and for a split second, Rylo saw the flicker of doubt in them. It was fleeting, but it was enough. Garroth wasn't as invincible as he wanted everyone to believe. Deep down, he knew he was playing a dangerous game. The countdown on the terminal flickered in Rylo's peripheral vision. Only a few seconds left. He was almost there. Garroth, sensing his moment of triumph slipping away, stepped forward with alarming speed, his hand outstretched toward Rylo. You're too late, he snarled. You think your little virus is going to stop me? You think I haven't anticipated every possible outcome? I control this war now. But Rilo was faster. His hand shot out, slamming a command sequence into the terminal just as Garroth reached him. There was a split second of silence, and then the entire room hummed as the systems locked down. The color drained from Gareth's face as the terminal went dark, his once unshakable confidence cracking. No, this can't be. The failsafe had been activated. Gareth's access to the fleet was cut off. His commands to mobilize were now nullified. The Shriek would not receive their final signal, and the fleet would be left stranded, unable to act. Rilo stood up straight, finally meeting Gareth's eyes, his voice quiet but firm. It's over, Garroth. Your plans are finished. For a moment, there was silence. Garroth stood frozen, his mind clearly scrambling for some way out, some last-ditch maneuver to regain control. But it was too late. The virus had worked. The fleet was immobilized, and Garroth was powerless. Elara stepped forward now, her steps calculated, her eyes never leaving the traitor. You thought you could control the galaxy through fear and power, Garroth. But in the end, you were just another pawn. You'll never have the power you wanted. Gareth's lips curled into a bitter, twisted smile. You're wrong, he said coldly. This galaxy will burn, and I will be its fire. Rilo felt a cold shiver run down his spine as Gareth's words settled in. The Admiral wasn't just a power-hungry maniac, he was delusional. He truly believed that this galaxy would be better off in the ashes of war, under his iron grip. But Rilo wasn't about to let him have that. Not while there was breath in his lungs. Before Garroth could say another word, Elara moved, her hand reaching for her sidearm. In one swift motion, she had the weapon trained on Gareth's chest. The threat was clear. This is over. Gareth's eyes flicked down to the gun, and for the first time, doubt flickered across his face. He raised his hands, a faint, mocking laugh escaping him. Do it, then. End it. But Rilo was already stepping forward, shaking his head. No. We're not like you. We're not going to stoop to your level. You'll stand trial. And you'll be held accountable for the chaos you've caused. Elara hesitated, then slowly lowered her weapon. The fire in her eyes hadn't dulled, but the decision had been made. Garroth wasn't going to get an easy end. He would be taken in, tried for his crimes, and made to face the consequences of his treachery. You're done, Elara said firmly, taking Rilo's side. This war will be fought for something better. Something worth protecting. Garroth glared at them both, but there was no longer any power in his gaze. His defeat was inevitable, and as Rilo and Elara turned to leave, they knew they had just averted a disaster of unimaginable proportions. But the galaxy's future was still uncertain. There was much work to be done before the full weight of Gareth's treason was realized, and before the war could truly come to an end. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. And Rilo wasn't about to rest until the galaxy was safe. The halls of the Concord's command base were quieter than they had been in months. The tension that had plagued the corridors for so long had finally been broken. Garroth, once the symbol of military might and stability, was now in custody, awaiting trial for his treachery. The fleet had been immobilized, and the threat of the Shriek invasion was temporarily halted. But the battle was far from over, and Rilo knew they had only just begun to rebuild what Garroth had nearly destroyed. As Rilo and Elara walked through the now empty command center, their minds were already on the next steps. They had won a significant victory, but they were painfully aware that the war had taken a new shape. Gareth's betrayal was a wake-up call. There were still those who sought power at any cost, and the galaxy was teetering on the brink of chaos. But Rilo was determined that it wouldn't be this way. He had seen the destruction of the past, and he wasn't about to let it happen again. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, Elara said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but there was a weariness in her eyes that reflected the weight of the journey they had just endured. The fleet may be safe for now, but Garetha's influence still runs deep in the ranks. We'll need to root out every last bit of corruption before we can fully trust the military again. Rilo nodded, his mind spinning with plans and contingencies. It's going to take time, but we've got the truth on our side. The Shriek, Garroth, everything that's happened, it's all been a wake-up call. We can't keep relying on military power alone. We need to start thinking about the galaxy as a whole. Ilara's gaze softened. And what do you have in mind? Unity, Rilo replied. His voice was firm, but there was a new sense of resolve in it, one that had emerged from the depths of the struggle they'd faced. The Titan core was never supposed to be a weapon, it was supposed to be a symbol of peace, a tool for rebuilding what's been broken. We need to restore that vision. We need to unite the galaxy, not under the thumb of the military, but through cooperation, through shared goals. Ilara raised an eyebrow, considering his words. It's going to be hard. There are so many factions, so many races with their own agendas. The Concord isn't just a military organization, it's a fragile coalition. I know, Rilo said. But if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that the galaxy isn't defined by the power of the few, it's defined by the will of the many. The people want peace. They want a chance to rebuild. We need to show them that we're not just fighting for control, but for a future they can believe in. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from Rilo's communicator. He glanced at it, his expression hardening as he read the message. It's from the council, Rilo said, his voice steady but tinged with anticipation. They want a meeting. They're offering me a seat at the table. Ilara frowned. Are you sure they can be trusted? After everything Garroth did, the council could still have people loyal to him. I don't have a choice, Rilo replied, his jaw tightening. The council represents the galaxy's last hope for a united front. If we can convince them, we can turn the tide of this war. But if they're still harboring traitors, he trailed off, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. I'll be with you, Ilara said, her voice resolute. Whatever happens, we face it together. Rilo smiled slightly. I wouldn't want it any other way. The council chambers were a massive, circular room, filled with representatives from every corner of the galaxy. It was a place where decisions were made, where the fate of billions rested on the words spoken within these walls. And now, as Rilo stepped into the room, he couldn't help but feel the gravity of the moment. He wasn't just fighting for the survival of the Concord anymore. He was fighting for the future of the galaxy itself. The council members, a diverse array of leaders from different species, sat in a semicircle before him. They regarded him with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and, if he wasn't mistaken, fear. Garetha's betrayal had shaken everyone to their core. They weren't sure who they could trust anymore. And yet, here Rilo stood, the engineer who had brought the Titan core to life and, against all odds, stopped Garroth in his tracks. One of the council members, an older woman from the Saran race, spoke first. Her voice was calm but sharp. Rilo Tenor, you've done the impossible. You've stopped Garroth and prevented the Shriek from attacking. But you must understand, the damage has already been done. The trust that was broken, the divisions in the ranks, these things cannot be repaired overnight. Rilo met her gaze without flinching. I understand. But I've seen what happens when we focus on power alone. We become like Garroth, willing to sacrifice everything for control. The people of this galaxy want peace. They want to rebuild, to live without fear. And if we continue down this path of division and distrust, we'll only create another Garroth. Another war. Another council member, a young and idealistic leader from the Viridian Alliance, nodded. I agree. It's time for a new vision. We can't keep relying on the old systems. We need something better, something stronger. The older Saran woman narrowed her eyes. And what do you propose, Rilo? How do we restore trust when everything is so fractured? Rilo took a deep breath, his heart steady despite the weight of the decision before him. We start by putting the people first. We rebuild the core, not as a weapon, but as a symbol of what we can accomplish together. We unite the various factions through shared resources, shared goals. We give the galaxy a chance to heal, not under the control of a single power, but through cooperation. The council chamber was silent for a moment as Rylo's words echoed through the room. Slowly, one by one, the council members began to nod, their expressions thoughtful. It wasn't going to be easy. The galaxy had been torn apart by war, by betrayal, and by the constant fight for dominance. But in that room, something was shifting. For the first time in a long while, there was a glimmer of hope. The Saran leader spoke again, her voice softening. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps it's time for a new way. Rylo looked at Alara, who stood silently at his side. Together, they had fought to get here, to stand before the council and challenge the very systems that had failed the galaxy time and time again. They weren't done yet, but they had taken the first step. This is just the beginning, Rylo said, his voice filled with resolve. But we can make a difference. We can rebuild this galaxy. Together. And as the council began to discuss the next steps, a new era began to take shape. The war was far from over, but the first seeds of peace had been planted. The journey ahead would be long, and the challenges unimaginable. But Rylo knew that as long as they remained united, as long as they fought for the good of the many instead of the few, there was hope. The galaxy had been broken, but it could be whole again.